in Node.js. In today's video, we are going to discuss about a basic user login. Now, what I mean by saying basic user login. So actually, this part of the video is going to come in two different variations. Like the current video will be the variation 1. The next video is going to be variation 2. So in the current video, we are going to set up a very basic user authentication system where user can sign up and user can log in, right? In order to set up that, we are not going to use any fancy algorithms, nothing like that. For this video, we are going to keep everything basic just to eventually understand the flow, that how this authentication module is going to be used as a middleware, what basic things you can do for a login and sign up. So in this video, we are going to just use normal SQL queries in order to just check the fact that whether the user is logged in or not, or let's say whether the user is already available in the database or not. In the next part of this video, we are going to implement a JWT token based very strong authentication system. We are going to use a lot of logic from JWT and bcrypt in order to implement a better, a stronger version of authentication system, right? So without any further delay, let's just start. So in order to build an authentication system, let me tell you first of all a bit of architecture of it. So what happens? So actually there are two types of systems. One is an authentication system, one is an authorization system. So one is called as authentication and one is called as authorization. These are two very known terms in development field. What is authentication? Authentication means that when a user tries to fetch data, when a user tries to fetch data from the backend, then we figure out the fact that whether the user is a valid registered user or not, and whether they have successfully set up a session by logging in or not, right? So authentication means that whether the user is a registered user or not, and whether they have set up a session by successfully logging in to our website or not. This is authentication. For example, your normal login, log out, sign in, sign up, these kind of things. What is authorization? Authorization means that the user is already inside the application. Now there are multiple resources of the application. Multiple different resources are going to be accessible to different authorization of authorized people. For example, not everyone in our application can add a category, right? Only an authorized admin can add a category, not a normal user. So admin is having a higher level of priority. So admin is authorized for some of the resources. User is authorized for some of the resources. User is not authorized for some of the resources. That is how much, I would say, responsibility you have given to an actor of your application is the authorization system. But in this two video series, we are going to specifically focus on authentication system. Now what happens when we try to authenticate? So let's say this is our client and this is our server. So the client sends an HTTP request to the server, right? Now the server will be having some resources which are going to be accessible for everyone. For example, if you have seen Quora.com, then in Quora you can read a lot of answers without even logging or signing. Even in Flipkart.com, you can see a lot of products without even logging in, right? But in order to add a product to your cart or even purchase a product, then you have to be authenticated or signed in. So depending on the request that has been received at the server's end, the server will try to fetch the fact that whether we have successfully authenticated inside our system or not. So in order to check the fact that whether we have successfully authenticated or not, the server is going to expect the client to send some more data, and the server will then validate the fact that whether the user is signed in or not. If the user is successfully signed in, then the server will say that, okay, yes, the user is signed in and we are good to go. Then the user is going to move the request to the controller and the rest of the thing happen. If the user is not able to sign in successfully, then the server will not even give the request to the controller. There will be a middle layer of authentication that is going to stop all those requests that are not authenticated correctly. This is going to be a very important thing that we need to understand, right? Okay. So first of all, in order to build our authentication system, let's go step by step, right? In the first step, we are going to build a user controller and a user model. So first of all, let's just build a user model for us. Okay, cool. So let me close all the files. And now we are going to make a new file, user.js, right? Cool. Now we are going to write our basic logic. First of all, because we need to have access to the user table, right? A lot of things will be going on that we need to have the access to the user table. So we are going to have const SQL connection is equals to require. We will go to the SQL connection file, which is inside services SQL connection. This is going to be great, right? So apart from that, what we are going to have is a function that will help us to sign up, right? And a function that is going to help us to log in. These two functions we are going to implement. We'll do module.exports, sign up, login. Okay, these two functions we are going to actually implement. Cool. So how can we implement a basic sign up? So when a user is going to register at your application, the user is going to send an email, a password, and a lot of things. So we'll say data callback, right? Because we are going to fetch some user data. User is going to give us some data that we are going to use here. Okay. So we'll say let SQL is equals to insert into users, and this will be a multi-line string. Insert into users, values. What values we are going to insert? But first of all, we need to mention the columns. So this is username, then password, then created at, and updated at. Right, let's see if we are having the names correct. So let's go to users and columns, and yes, names are correct, right? And then we can say values. What are the values? The username will be given by user, the password will be given by user, created at and updated at can be something that we can have it from the timestamping functions, and the SQL is ready. We'll say let values equal to the array, because you remember inside this array we are going to have all the values that are going to actually replace the question marks. So we'll say values dot push data dot username, values dot push data dot password, right? So we have added the data dot username and password. Now we'll say SQL connection dot execute query SQL comma values, and then we'll send a callback function error comma result, and whatever callback has been passed to us by the controller, we'll just pass the error and result to that. So using this basic function, we are able to register a user. And don't you think it is very easy, right? We'll just take the email and the password and store it in the database. Now the problem here is the password will be stored in the raw format, like whatever the password the user has sent, we are going to actually store it as it is. So later in the next version of this video, we are going to also encrypt the password so that no one else, like in our dev team, no one else is able to see any other user's password, because then they will be able to authenticate with them and see their data. That's not something that we want. So this was the overall sign up model flow that we are going to have. Okay, so now we are going to implement the login functionality. In the login functionality also, whenever the user wants from the front end to login, so he or she will add an email and add a password, right? So we'll say data callback. Again, we'll be having some data with us, right? And we'll say let SQL is equals to, we'll again have a hey everyone, welcome. Username will again have a multi-line string. Select ID as user ID, comma, username username as username only, and password, comma, user type from users, where username is equals to question mark, right? So what we'll be having is, we will be getting the user ID, username and password, right, based on the username that the user has sent. And then we are going to validate the password, that whether the password that was sent by the user and the password that we have stored in our database is same or not. So we'll say that let values is equals to the empty array. We'll say values dot, because we have only one question mark, that means we'll just add username, and then we'll say SQL connection dot execute query, SQL values, and a callback. Now, before actually passing our callback to the, like passing our result to the controller's callback, now we have to actually set up our logic, right? Here we have to actually build the functionality that we are able to check both the passwords, right? So what you can do is, either you can like check the password directly from here, from result.password and what password the user has sent, or you can even check this on the front end, but we can do it here only. So let's say if data.password is equals to result dot password, right, then only we are going to call the callback with error comma result, right? This is something that we can do, right? And you can even do this check on the controller end. Anything should work fine, right? Otherwise we are going to just send, else we are just going to send error comma empty result, and this should be result of 0.password, because we are going to fetch an array. It will be an array of object, and the 0th object is going to have our password. So this should be the case for the basic login functionality, right? So the basic model is ready for us. The sign up and login model is ready for us. Now we need to hop on to actually the controller, that how we are going to write the controller logic for our user. So we are going to write a new user controller which will be having all this functionality. Okay, so let's say we are going to have a new file, user controller.js, right? Again, same thing, model, view, controller, everything is same. We'll first fetch the user model from require models user. So we have got the user model. We'll say function sign up. So there will be a sign up controller. It will again get a request and a response, right? First of all, we'll get the data that is from the request.body. It will be a post request. So from request.body, we are going to fetch the data, right? And then we'll say that if data.username and data.password. If the user has given us both of the things, then only we are going to move forward with the sign up flow. Otherwise, we are just going to return bad request. So return rest.status 400.send message. We'll say username or password is missing, and we'll say success is false. Okay, but if we are going to have our username and password, we'll check. We'll go to call the user model. So user. Now we need to first of all, okay, so here we can do few things. We can set up a new model function that is going to give us the sign up details, and then also we can do the checks, right? So here you can see in the user.js model, what we have done is a basic sign up query and a basic login query. But what we can do is we can even add one more function that is going to help us segregate the code even more. So let's just first add that, right? So we will say we'll have one more function, get users sign up details from data callback. Now what this function is actually going to do, now just think about it. If the user is already registered, then we should not register them again, right? That is something that we are going to check here. So we'll say let SQL is equals to select ID as user ID, username, password, or let's say user type. Just user type is the admin type or the normal user type. That is something in the user type. From users where username is equals to question mark and password is equals to question mark. That is, so what is the flow? When the user will try to sign up, he or she will fill up a form. From the form, we will fetch the username and password. Then we'll go to the backend, and then we will check that is there any entry in the users table with the same username or password or not, right? That is something that we are going to check. So let values is equals to an empty array. We'll say values dot push data dot username, values dot push data dot password, and we'll say SQL connection execute query SQL values and again callback, and then we'll pass the error and result to the callback. This is something that we are going to do here. So this new user model function is ready. Let's export this function so that we can use it in the controller. So now it is going to be available for the usage in the controller. Now in the controller, when we have received the request here in the sign up, what we are going to do, we are going to check whether it is already signed up or not. So we'll say user dot gets user sign up details, right? And now we are going to pass our data. So inside the data, we'll be having the username and password, and we'll be having a callback function error comma result, right? If something wrong happened, then we'll say console.log error, and we'll say that return res.status 500.send. We are going to send some data, right? We'll say message error during sign up, right? And we'll say success as false. And if there was no error, So we will not enter the if check, and then we will say, that if result.length, because we are going to get an array. If this length is greater than 0, that means we have definitely found at least one user with the same username and password. So we'll say that return res.status. Let's see what status code we can put. So we are having, we can send 406, or we can say 409, anything, right? Conflicting state, or maybe 401 we can also send unauthorized, that you are not authorized for this request. Anything we can send. I am going with 409 dot send success as false, message as user already exists. And if the user doesn't exist, then what we are going to do? So else user dot sign up. We are going to sign up for the user. We are going to pass the data and the callback error result. If there will be any error during sign up, we'll say console.log error. We'll print the error. We'll say return res.status 500 dot send success false, message error during sign up. And then if we are able to successfully sign up, then we will not go into the error. We will say that return res.status 200 dot send. Then we'll be having a message successfully signed up. We'll be having a success parameter with true, and we are going to say, let's say we'll pass a data with let's say a username. We can send a username also, or we can just keep it as it is because we have just signed up. So yeah, this will be the sign up flow. This will be the correct sign up flow. So let me repeat the whole flow once so that you can get a better hang of it. Before doing that, let's do module.export. Okay, cool. So what we can directly see here is, whenever the user is going to try to sign up, he or she is going to fetch a request and a response, right? Inside the request object, the user will send a username and a password. If the user has not sent a username and password, we will not enter inside this if check, else we will enter inside this else check and we'll send a 400 bat request. If the user has sent a username and password, then we need to fetch that whether there is some already an user which is already there with the same user and username. So we'll go to this get user sign up details. Here you can see, based on the username and password, we are fetching the user, right? And then we are checking that whether this is the same user or not. And if this is the same user that we are checking here, so we are checking if it was the same user, then there would have been at least one result that we would have fetched from the database. So we'll check result.length is greater than 0 or not. Otherwise, we are going to actually sign up and we are going to use this model.signup. Here we are just inserting the values based on the username, password created at, updated at. And then if there was any error during the sign up, we'll throw the error. Otherwise, we'll say successfully signed up. So this was, I would say, a very easy flow. Now we need to build another flow for login as well. We'll build another flow for login as well. So we'll add this login function in module.exports, and then we'll say that let data is equals to request.body, because the user is again going to send a username and password. If data.username and data.password, if both of the fields are there, then we will do something, else we will do something. What we'll do in the else? We'll say return rest.status 400 dot send success as false, message as username or password not present. Okay, now what we are going to say, user dot login. If you have sent a username and password, you will say user dot login. You'll pass the data and the callback function, right? If there is an error, we'll say console.log error, return rest.status 500, there was some internal server error, dot send success false, message something went wrong, not able to log in. Okay, cool. This was the case when there was an error while doing a login. Otherwise, we will say that if result dot length is double equals to 0, that means we were not able to find any user with the same username and password, then we'll say return rest dot send 404, sorry, rest dot status 404 not found, success false, message username or password is incorrect. Okay, this is something from the client side only. And if we are able to fetch a record, then what we are going to do is we will say return rest.status 200 dot send success as true and message as successfully logged in. So this will be the login flow that we are able to successfully log in. Now just think about it. The user has logged in. Now in the subsequent request, like let's say now the user wants to add a product, or let's say fetch a product, or let's say add the product to the cart. How the user will be able to do it? There should be some mechanism that the user should have so that he or she can prove that they have successfully logged in. Right? This mechanism we have to build. So in order to build this mechanism, what we have to do, we have to now introduce JWT tokens. JWT tokens are going to be a very, I would say, strong way in order to authenticate the user, right? We are going to integrate JWT tokens in the next video. And apart from that, we are also going to encrypt our data based on like the password field, what we are storing in the database. This is something that we are going to do in the next video, right? But first of all, our sign up flow is ready. At least sign up flow is completely ready with the basic, I would say, mechanism. We are not encrypting the data. So what we can do, we can add at least a route for the sign up and then try to enter a user at least, right? So what we can do is let's go to the routes, right? And we'll say router dot post slash user slash sign up, and we need to have user controller. So const we'll go to the user controller. So inside source controller, right, slash, or 1 second, source controllers user controller. Okay, so we'll say user controller dot sign up. So this flow is ready, right? So let's say we will restart the server and we can come back to Postman. We'll say user, what was the route? Slash user slash sign up. Okay, post request, we need to send a username, let's say temp, and a password, let's again say temp. And if we'll try to send, so see, successfully signed up, And if we will come to our table, we'll say users and run the code. Then you can see a temp record has been made, right? And the user type is by default 0. That is the normal user. We have not given the user an admin access, right? So the overall sign up flow is working. Now we have two tasks in our hand. We have to integrate JWT tokens in this whole authentication flow, and we need to also encrypt our data so that the overall sign up and login mechanism can become even stronger, right? So I hope that you guys enjoyed this part of the video. The next part will be the subsequent video where we are going to add all the enhanced functionalities for our authentication. So we will meet up in the next video. Till then, take care guys, bye bye, and have a great week ahead, and thank you.